other. The jet had the ability to kneel down on its undercarriage, making for easier front loading, and had its own internal crane to pick up cargo at the rear, carry it straight into the aircraft, and place it where desired. The 124 excelled at going where jets usually don't go. It can use its gigantic landing gear to nimbly touch down anywhere it's needed, even on unpaved runways.
The Antonov 124 is capable of landing successfully on primitive runways. It has even landed in the polar region on frozen airstrips when we used to transport supplies to that region.
The first prototype flew in December 1982. By 1984, the airliner was in production. The same year, her creator, Oleg Antonov, died at the age of 78. The desk calendar in his office is still open at that date. Oleg Antonov's legacy to build big was reflected throughout the Soviet Union. Bigger was always better. From statues to helicopters, largeness reigned supreme. Since the Cold War, competition with the West was fierce, and Antonov's designers always strived to outdo the Americans.
I remember that all time we compete with United States in transport aircraft. United States built Hercules, we built Antonov 12, we built Antonov 22, United States built C5, we built Antonov 124, and after that we built just Antonov 225. And I don't know, maybe United States don't need bigger plane, and they do not build anything more bigger than Antonov 225.
Nowhere was the competition more intense than the race for space. The Soviets were developing their own space shuttle called Buran, which means snowstorm. In design, it looked similar to America's space shuttle. Soviet engineers had attempted to design something different, but in the end, a straight aerodynamic copy was selected. There were, however, significant differences. Buran had no main engines, so it had more payload capacity. It also relied entirely on external rocket boosters to achieve orbit, allowing it 4 times greater lifting power for cargo. Unlike America's shuttle with main engines, external tank and solid fuel boosters, Buran used liquid fuel boosters that were throttle controlled and could be turned on and off to avoid blow-up disasters like the 1986 Challenger tragedy. By the mid-80s, the Soviet shuttle program had fallen behind schedule, and they were desperate to keep up with America's program. The Soviets lacked a vehicle large enough to transport Buran, so in 1985, design began on the Antonov 225.
It was necessary to create and design a system and vehicle to carry the space shuttle from the manufacturing plants of the Soviet Union, which are located a long distance from the launch pad.
The Soviets wanted this plane built fast and on a tight budget.
We had very, very strict requirements to construct this aircraft as quickly as we could and with as little expense. It was all due to the fact that the United States already had their space shuttle and the USSR lagged behind.
The pressure was on for the Antonov Design Bureau.
So they decided to modernize the Antonov 124, to upgrade it, and use the 124's existing assemblies and parts to create a bigger, more effective jet for the purpose of moving the shuttle.
Nicknamed Maria, the Russian word for dream, the Antonov 225 grew from the technology that had built its little brother, the Antonov 124.
Looking at the 225, you can see that it has many similarities to the Antonov 124. There is a commonality between the two aircraft. The cross-section is identical to the Antonov 124. The wing panels of the 225 are actually identical to the 124. And the engines are the same as Antonov 124. There are 6, though, instead of 4.
But using the 124's existing technology was not enough. Radical design changes had to be made, most of them to do with size and power.
There was a change of the tail unit. It's a twin-fin tail to compensate for carrying Buran on top of the aircraft. There is no aft cargo door because of the length of the fuselage, and we increased the number of rear landing gear struts. We have 7 on each side for the Antonov 225, with a total of 32 tires, including front landing gear.
The designers at Antonov in Kiev were only given 3.5 years to design this gigantic new jet and get it off the ground. Initially, the task seemed insurmountable. The engineers couldn't even find a place big enough to build the aircraft.
It was a problem to find a location to construct the aircraft, for it would not fit in any existing facility. At first, we had to build the fuselage in parts and store the parts at angles to fit them inside the shop.
Due to Soviet bureaucracy, at one point the Antonov 225's designers had more jet than hangar.
In the USSR at the time, it was more complicated to construct a new building than a new jet. We used to construct aircraft in those days quicker than buildings, and we had to build the 225 so rapidly it grew faster than the building we were making it in.
But its size was continuing to cause other problems. The 225 was designed to transport gigantic cargoes, and the jet needed to be able to land.
We encountered great problems with landing gear. We faced the problem of creating the aircraft with a takeoff weight of 600 tons that would also be capable of landing on unprepared airfields. The landing gear had to be made so that it would not break the runway.
The designers came up with a solution. A massive bank of landing gear on the Antonov 225 that puts 18-wheel trucks to shame. Its 32 tires burn rubber every time this 600-ton behemoth touches down. There were other challenges as well. One of these only came to light when the jet was nearly complete.
When the aircraft was constructed, it turned out that it wasn't possible to install the Buran on top of it. We had no cargo handling equipment back then, and the crane on the field was not able to install it. So engineers quickly designed a special crane to lift the Buran 60 feet onto the 225's back.
But the 225's designers finally overcame the difficulties associated with their massive aircraft and met their deadline. With pomp and circumstance, the aircraft was rolled out of the hangar. Now it was time to prove that this 6-engine giant could fly. The Antonov design team had met the strict Soviet government deadline for the 225.
It was a tradition in those days to finish the tasks by the end of the year. The aircraft flew first on December 1st, 1988.
Those who had initially thought that flying the Antonov 225 would be impossible suddenly experienced a change of heart as the aircraft began its historic first flight.
We started to test the aircraft on taxiway. Next, trial runs on the runway, and finally, the first maiden flight. And when it took to the air, I saw that flying the 225 was absolutely possible, and it was incredible.
Everyone who had worked on the jet felt a deep affection for it, from designers to test pilots.
I felt very, very proud when I first saw it take off. It was a joyous time. My name is Alexander Galunenko. I'm the leading test pilot of the Antonov 225 aircraft. Of course I enjoyed this job. It is like no other, a real challenge. This aircraft is absolutely one of a kind.
But would the mighty 225 fly with a 90-ton shuttle strapped to its back? Within months of its maiden flight, the Antonov 225 broke 109 world records for range, altitude, and cargo capabilities. Finally, in 1989, the aircraft accomplished the mission it was designed for. It flew with the 90-ton Soviet space shuttle, the Buran, attached to it externally for the very first time.
It is very, very hard to express how I felt. Proud. I felt joy. I was in some euphoric state. I was overcome with joy when it flew with the orbiter. Everyone was.
With the Buran attached to its back, the Antonov 225 made its debut before a worldwide audience at the 1989 Paris Air Show. The gargantuan jet stole the show.
Well, I remember Paris in 1989 when all the other aircraft at the show had almost no visitors, but there was a long line of people standing around our craft wanting to visit it.
The Antonov 225's bulk and strength quickly captured the imagination of the world. There were even proposals to turn the Antonov into a flying cruise ship.
There were a lot of bizarre proposals on the part of very wealthy and rich people abroad. It was suggested to make it a flying hotel, with rooms and suites on the upper deck. And on the lower deck, there were swimming pools and casinos.
They even worked out how many people could fly aboard this recreational fantasy.
It is technically feasible that the jet could carry 1,500 people.
The largest capacity passenger jet in flight today is the Boeing 747-400. It carries 524 passengers when fully loaded. With modifications, the Antonov 225 could carry almost 3 times as many people. The Buran only ever made one spaceflight, and the 225 had only been airborne for a few short years when an event took place that changed the world forever. It also grounded all grandiose dreams about the future of this giant jet.
In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Soviet Union's space program, which included this aircraft, lost its financing.
Boris Yeltsin cancelled the Soviet space program due to lack of funds. And for another reason, its project manager was one of the planners of the attempted 1991 coup. The King of the Skies became a hulking derelict, its parts cannibalized for other jets. The only Antonov 225 in the world was being slowly plundered, sacrificed bit by bit to help save the company that had built it from economic ruin.
It was grounded because of lack of funds.